garbage, and everything in that game was balanced and architected to work on the level scale of 1 to 50. So when they kind of raised the level cap, they did no work on the engine to actually allow those numbers to make sense. So I ended up actually rewriting those manuals a couple times with the things that I discovered. And so one of the things that we did was do the pre-tapped spells so that everybody had like a hunting spell that they could use without having to, because basically being a high level caster meant you tap maybe twice, maybe 3 times if you're lucky, and then you sit for 10-15 minutes to regain your power.
Right.
So we were trying to do some spells that they could use without having to do that all the time.
Right. And I mean, in the sense that a lot of tappers and I guess maybe Chaos, maybe more than the other realms, but in general, they, players that played them, they were still pretty significantly large tappers. So do you think that, the power creep, if you will, for tappers was, maybe just a little bit off, or was it way off?
I think it felt way off because the game was so long in the tooth that we did eventually have quite a few big level tappers. But that was always kind of the point of being a tapper, like you had to suffer through the grind and get to a higher level. So once we started addressing that, like, it felt super weird because like you didn't want to necessarily make those characters useless, right? Anymore. We ended up discovering that the interesting thing about those pre-tap spells, which was that tap really had no effect on them anymore. So I don't remember if we got around to modifying the higher level spells, but it ended up kind of just being that basically the level 36 spell that would become like the level 50 spell wasn't really all that much powerful than it had been at level 36. So I remember it being kind of the same, more or less, at the end. Or at least that was the goal. Whether that actually translated, I don't know.
Okay, so let's we'll go to the
interesting. I'm not sure how explicit that can be, but some of it was pretty ridiculous.
Did it ever feel overwhelming to have that kind of there while you were doing your work?
It was. We could actually tune it out if we wanted to by switching our realm. You can only hear it if you were realm 0. As soon as you assigned yourself to a realm, you could you're basically opting into only the plan for that guild. So yeah, sometimes we would totally tune it out. But I actually found it really comforting to see, because it just reminded you that there was stuff going on. When it was really silent, it's like, okay, nobody's planning. Somebody's doing some nefarious crap right now. So you'd start kind of looking around. But yeah, I absolutely loved it. It was a lot of fun.
So my next question for you is, what is your opinion on games that have come out after DFC, and how do they compare with DFC?
He's a monk, and he's like, he would just plan the most ridiculous garbage. So yeah, listening to that stuff was always interesting. I'm not sure how explicit that can be, but some of it was pretty ridiculous.
Did it ever feel overwhelming to have that kind of there while you were doing your work?
It was. We could actually tune it out if we wanted to by switching our realm. You can only hear it if you were realm 0. As soon as you assigned yourself to a realm, you could you're basically opting into only the plan for that guild. So yeah, sometimes we would totally tune it out. But I actually found it really comforting to see, because it just reminded you that there was stuff going on. When it was really silent, it's like, okay, nobody's planning. Somebody's doing some nefarious crap right now. So you'd start kind of looking around. But yeah, I absolutely loved it. It was a lot of fun.
So my next question for you is, what is your opinion on games that have come out after DFC, and how do they compare with DFC?
I'm a strange person when it comes to these games, because I always say, like, I love to play my uh, MMOs as like a single player games. um, and to a large extent, the games have all become kind of single player experiences, because all you have to do is like queue up for stuff, and you're magically paired with people and that you don't have to talk to and don't have to deal with beyond whatever shared brainless thing you're doing. Um, so I think most games can't compare to the sense of community and just engagement that you had in Darkness Falls. There's one that's kind of coming close, and that's Black Desert Online, just released recently. That feels a lot more like something I would have expected to come from a DFC. Um, but even that has a very large like single player component to it, where you can just basically ignore the rest of the players forever.
Forever.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's true. Good point. What is your favorite game to play right now?
Right now, um, probably the most honest answer for that is Street Fighter Five. I'm a huge Street Fighter nerd. But outside of that, I've been playing The Division quite a bit in my very, very rare spare time.
What about in, say, the last 10 years? Your favorite
Yeah.
game?
I played a lot of WoW. I played a lot of WoW and Street Fighter 4. I've put hundreds of hours in Street Fighter 4, which should have not surprised you after saying Street Fighter 5 was my current favorite game. But yeah, I played a lot of WoW, and then I do a huge circuit around MMOs like once a year, I want to say. So I've played a lot of them. Like I played Guild Wars, DC Universe, Star Wars. I tried I can't even remember the name of it because it sucked. But I basically try anything once. Final Fantasy 14 as well. But yeah, I tend to just come back to WoW as like my comfort food.
Do you think, are you part of the crowd that feels that Cataclysm ruined the game in World of Warcraft?
Actually, Cataclysm brought me back into the game. Um, but in a lot of ways, yeah, Cataclysm was kind of the start, like the cementing of, oh, I get it. This is a Wildstar. Yeah, chat said Wildstar. That was the one game I couldn't remember. But yeah, they just simplified everything so much. Like you don't have talent points anymore. That might even happen before. I don't remember. But yeah, it's definitely not the same game anymore. It's kind of just I just come back to it because I have an abusive relationship with it. Um, yeah.
Um, and back to DFC here. So, Nix, I believe, asks, which guild collectively was the worst to deal with?
Skeletons. That's not even a question. Skellies they were the loudest guild, um, but it was also no offense to them, but usually it was mostly just nonsense. Um, they were just loud to be loud. The next guild was probably ogres. Ogres were a, a complainy bunch. Man, that sounds so terrible when I say it, but they had the most kind of collective dissatisfaction. It was mostly always because of wards, um, and I can't blame them. Like a lot of chaos actually saw a lot of changes to their core mechanics over and over and over, more so than most other realms, I want to say. Um, trying to think if there was anybody else that really stands out, but I think those are the two.
And since you mentioned it, what was your opinion on wards in chaos? Did you feel that they were warranted? Was it something that they should have had and that kept a kind of a balance, or was there an overall problem that you felt?
I thought wards were fascinating. However, like most of chaos, I think the mechanics were fell short in the way they were implemented. Um, but I really like them. I never really dealt with them Honestly, when all those changes to chaos were happening, when Felicia was making all those changes, like the bombs and wards and stuff, I was that was above my pay grade at that time. So so a lot of the decisions that were made there, we just kind of dealt with over time. But I thought wards were a very interesting mechanic, and I thought they were fine. Um, yeah, well, not really much else to say.
What was the? I'm curious. What was the original setup for wards, and what was the actual change made to them?
So wards were just more powerful at the time. They just got brought down a little bit, and I think there was some changes to like their duration as well. So like one of the biggest complaints that the ogres would have is that their wards wouldn't last as long, and they always had to tap them. So they felt that having to tap wards meant that they then had to sit for power, which made it a liability. So I think over time we ended up the biggest changes that ended up happening were just messing with the duration of wards.
Okay, next question from the audience. If DFC was up and running today, would you try it, or would you play it, or how would you go about it?
Yeah, I would play it absolutely. Um, I would probably play. I'd probably play Chaos this time around. Because that breath was pumped, yo. No, no, I would probably play Chaos because that's the only realm I never really played. Like I made over my years as a staff member, like I never really had a player character that I identified with, but I always made characters and tried to level them. I tried to level every character to like 30 or so, just so I could get a feel for it, you know. Because it made no sense to me that a lot of staff members were making decisions about classes without ever really understanding the class, you know, or at least what you had to go through those first that first kind of 30 level experience. But outside of that, like I never really had a lot of um, I was never really involved with the community in chaos, you know. So um, yeah, I think that's what I would do.
And we'll continue with the audience here. Do you feel that auto rollers broke the game, or did it make it better?
In a vacuum, auto rollers are fine. Um, in essence, though, I think it did kind of break a lot of things. Okay, I'm gonna get on a soapbox for a sec. Two things really foobarred the game. The first was auto rollers, and the second was rebuilds. Um, because auto rollers allowed people to have just optimal stats, and a lot of the original players that had the most time into the game had settled for crap stats or not knowing any better, you know. And you've got years of investment into a character, and suddenly you're at a major disadvantage because stats were a big deal, you know. So yeah, absolutely. I think auto rollers definitely broke the game.
And Johnny D asks, kind of as a follow up to that, we know that in Syrah you had opted for the allocation method for stats.
Mm.
What do you, was that just a personal choice, or do you feel there's an ideal way to generate a character in this game format?
It was a personal choice because of auto rollers or taking auto rollers into account, right? It seems like it's just tedious because in order to have a viable character, what you had to do was wait for optimal stats, right? So why even bother? Like just remove the crap, right? Like I'm not a fan of mechanics that require that are there just for the sake of costing you time. So kind of in the same vein of like I kind of respect the changes they made to WoW for that reason. Like it seems simplified because they're removing options, but really all they did was they discovered that people had optimal builds, right? So they're like, well, people always end up with this one build, so why even bother with this, you know, with this facade? So that's kind of why I prefer allocation because then there's no time investment. You kind of know what you're going for, and you can just